Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet Preview Series presented by OTGBasketball.com. Make sure to follow OTG on Twitter at OTGBasketball. Also, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, on all these preview pods, Kory Waldron. And another special guest today, my international friend, Jack Manuell. What's up, guys?
What up, guys?
What's up, fellas? Let's do it again.
We are back to our preview series today onto number team 26, the Chicago Bulls. So before we talk about that ranking, let's talk about the Bulls for last season. 41-41, 8th seed, made the playoffs, a really interesting year. What are your guys' initial thoughts about the Bulls from last year?
Average, basically, literally 41-41 average. Like, it was unremarkable, but it was a very unremarkable season. Just apart from those two wins in the playoffs where, like, Rajon Rondo was just like, was it 2008? Is it, like, have we gone back in time? That was the only thing that surprised me. And Jimmy Butler was just doing Jimmy Butler things. We all expected that. He is a top 10, top 15 player. Other than that, like, there wasn't really much fanfare around them. Like, I don't know about you guys.
Early on, they were interesting when Wade was like hitting threes, and he did like the cutthroat at the crowd, like after he hit like a three early on in the season. You were like, wow, maybe the Bulls could like surprise people because everyone was worried about their 3-point shooting. And then after like 15 games, everything started to slightly go downhill. But they were interesting. They had a lot of chaos around them all season, and they were what they were, an 8 seed.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head. They started the season really hot, and everybody was like, wow, are the Bulls going to be better than we thought? Dwayne Wade started cooking from three, which is something we've never really seen before. And then, obviously they had Rajon Rondo, and he was playing well. And then as the season progressed, there was a lot of drama. We knew that whole thing when Rondo called out D. Wade on Instagram and Jimmy Butler saying, my vets wouldn't have acted this way and all that. And there was some drama. Then they kind of turned the ship around. They made the playoffs. Jack mentioned it. They won those 2 playoff games, and it looked like they might upset the Celtics, 1 seed, 8 seed upset. But then Rajon Rondo got hurt. Do you guys think if Rondo played that series that the Bulls could have possibly pulled that upset?
Yeah, I honestly think that it could have happened. Like, the Celtics were really shaky, and there was just something about that Bulls offense and just the way that they clicked around Rajon Rondo. It's like it's like the TNT Bulls. Like, there was just something about them that just didn't work for the Celtics. And had he have not gotten injured, it definitely would have at least gone to 7. And who knows what could have happened from there.
I definitely think that series would have won 7 games if Rondo stayed healthy. I'm not positive the Bulls would have beat them, but that offense was really flowing and working with Rondo. And I can't remember the comeback. I think Avery Bradley said after game 2, like, Rondo had said like they've given up or something near like the Celtics bench. And the confidence and all momentum was surely on Chicago's side.
And not only was Rondo helping offensively, Brad Stevens, I think, mentioned this, was that Rondo is a great defensive player in the sense that he studies your playbook and he knows what you're trying to do. And what he did is he took away their first, second option on plays, and he made it a lot more difficult for them to run their sets. Even though the Celtics are running one of the most complex sets in the NBA, Rondo did a great job making it difficult for them. And then I think when they lost Rondo, confidence was lost from the Bulls and confidence was gained from the Celtics, and then just kind of ended up being Boston taking the series and handling business, and it kind of helped give them a little bit more confidence in the next round.
I think for sure.
And one thing about the Bulls, we talked about it, they started the season hot from 3. As it progressed, they were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the NBA, and we know that the game is revolved around the three-point ball right now.
D-Wade was never going to do it for more than 20 games. I mean, and I think it was Gabrielle Union or someone was just saying, like, you can't shoot threes, babe. And it's just like, she's kind of right. Like, you can't. And I mean, now that he's still on this roster, will he still be on there come opening night? We'll wait and see. But, with D-Wade as your best player on your roster right now, things aren't really looking that bright for the Bulls.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Also, they had Michael Carter-Williams on that team, so just a ton of guards that couldn't shoot the 3-ball, which was terrible. What do you think would be the highlight of the Bulls season last year?
I think it was just the 2 playoff wins. And Rajon Rondo, I don't think he was given enough credit with the Bulls. As much as there was the whole controversy with him and Jimmy Butler and D. Wade, now that things are coming into the light a bit, a lot of people have been saying, like, no one really wants to play with D. Wade. He's not a good teammate. He doesn't practice. Whereas, those young players, your Cameron Paynes, those bench guys, they're like, and Michael Carter-Williams, they're saying Rajon Rondo is, your prototypical vet who brings the energy to the locker room. So I think Rajon Rondo, as much as for all his foibles, he was a really good glue guy for that Bulls roster.
You know, can I just say how silly it is, like players not liking Wade for not working out? I mean, not that it's that it's ideal to have a guy like Wade who like not practice every day. But when you get older and you've had the knee issues, like a guy like Wade, like he still put up pretty good numbers last year. And I get like if guys are upset he's not practicing, he's still putting up the numbers on the floor. And he was still one of the better players, even though for the first time last year, like I saw Wade hit the rim on like two or three dunks. Like, you know, I'm talking like me in the gym going for a dunk and just hitting the front of the rim type of dunks. Like I've become 35 Dwayne Wade.
Yeah, it's not a good feeling when you get rejected by the rim. I mean, I think Wade probably a little bit of the practicing. I think it might be a little bit of the mentality. I don't know. I'm not in the locker room, so I don't like to really talk about that type of thing. But some people, I think what the reports were mentioned that, you know, him and Jimmy Butler kind of separated themselves from the rest of the team, and they acted like, you know, they're better than everybody else, which, you know, they're obviously were two of the better players, but you still need a camaraderie around the team and, you know, a good chemistry. And you mentioned Rajon Rondo. I think he did a good job of that. And it's also been reported, you know, players around the league who played with Rondo said he was a great teammate. Obviously, I think a lot of people either love him or hate him. For me, though, the highlight probably would be, you know, it doesn't really matter now, but I thought Jimmy Butler kind of took a next step in his game offensively. He became more of that reliant star that you need on your team. But I guess for a player that's still there, Cristiano Felicio off the bench, I thought was impressive. You know, he had some nice chemistry with Dwayne Wade rolling to the rim. I don't think he's ever going to be a star, but it was nice to see, you know, a bench player step up.
Yeah, he had a very good year for them. And I agree with the highlight player since I got a little sidetracked. I think Jimmy Butler, even though it was his last year, we know now he's on the Minnesota Timberwolves. For Bull fans, I mean, you at least got to see Jimmy Butler take his game to another level. Because last year, offensively, was definitely his best year.
I remember one game where, like, Butler was having a terrible first half. He didn't score. He was under double-digit points. Then the second half, he just turned it on. He willed the Bulls to a win, and that was just showing what type of player he was last year. And it's just kind of crazy thing about when he came in the league, all he could really do was play defense, and then he's established himself as a star player in this league.
And he also had, I think, 2 or 3 triple-doubles last year as well. We saw him actually like passing the ball, which we haven't really seen from Jimmy Butler. We know he's a subpar rebounder and good offensively and a great defender, but he started adding the passing game as well last year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how his game develops in Minnesota. What would be the disappointment for you guys?
The entire offseason. It was shambles, absolute shambles. Like, it's not only for me like the whole Jimmy Butler trade, but like, were you guys as like disappointed in the selling of that draft pick to the Warriors? Like, that made no sense to me at all, because what the Warriors ended up getting is a guy named Jordan Bell, who's like Draymond Green light blocking machine, perfect sort of, you know, glue energy guy that we sort of love. And like, it makes no sense when you're trying to rebuild and you need draft picks and you need young talent that you go ahead and sell it for like a mere $3.5 million. Like, what is the point?
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense at all.
None. Yeah, that's just one thing that really.
Not necessarily saying they should have drafted Bell because they have some bigs, but they could have obviously used a high second round pick to draft somebody. There's always a potential in the second round of somebody, you know, turning into a good player.
Jimmy Butler was a second round pick. Like, so I mean,
they should know better.
They should absolutely know better. So yeah, I mean, we could do an entire pod about their entire offseason. So I'll leave that at that.
You know, my disappointment. You know, now that you get the ball rolling on something like that, it's tough for me to disagree, because this front office, you know, all of last season to now it's been disgusting. You know, they bring in Fred Hoiberg and you give him none of the guys that he runs for his style of offense. He has very little shooters, and even this offseason, you don't really address that issue. You know, you get Chris Dunn a year later after trying to get him last year, a guy who can't shoot. You know, I think the front office as well, for me, is going to be the biggest disappointment.
Yeah, I think that's an easy disappointment. I mean, I could go back to the offseason from last year. I mean, I didn't think any of the fits even made sense.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
you
true. Getting Wade and Rondo was ridiculous.
Yeah, just, you know, you knew that those guys weren't ever really going to work. And like you said, Kory, you know, the Hoiberg system, he needs different type of players. He wants to be more of an offensive pace system where he's going to shoot more threes and stuff, and not having a point guard that can shoot, which to me is just so hard to have in the NBA nowadays. Even though Rondo shows that he can do some other stuff great. I mean, I still think you need a 3-point shooter at least your point guard spot, if not your 2 guard spot. So there's plenty of disappointments on this team.
Think about the point guards too, Nick, that they brought in. You know, every point guard they brought in last season, like Michael Carter Williams Jr. Isaiah Cannon wasn't bad. Cameron Payne, like everyone they get can't shoot threes, but they just get these one-way offensive guards.
I'd say Cameron Payne is a big disappointment too, because they traded McDermott and Taj Gibson for him, and that was supposed to be the piece they were getting back, and he couldn't even start at times when they had a ton of injuries, and he just like wasn't even. I mean, I know he dealt with injuries himself, and he was like spending some time in the G League, but like that trade does not look good right now.
Look, but Cameron Payne has probably the best dance moves in the NBA.
That's the best. That's only positive, I guess.
I was gonna say, I don't even think I see him play. I just see him dance.
Yeah, but he doesn't have his dance partner anymore. So, like, who's he going to do it with? He's going to do it with, like, Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine? Like, that's not going to be cool.
I'm sure Zach LaVine would give him a little shake and shake.
Yeah, I'm going to give a bit of shimmy.
He can be like the cheerleader for Zach LaVine when he's throwing down dunks.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably what's going to happen.
But let's talk about this year's ranking, number 26. I know what you guys kind of already think about this. So far, we've had the Brooklyn Nets at 30, the Hawks at 29, the Magic at 28, and the Knicks at 27, and then the Bulls today at 26. So what are your thoughts on this ranking?
When I did mine, Nick, I had them as the worst team in the NBA. So the 26 to 30 range is correct, but I it's negligible, those other teams that you mentioned about, like, who's going to finish where. Do the Nets make some trades and go all out tank mode mid-season? Do the Hawks do the same thing? Do the Bulls actually want to? The Bulls seem to me to be the most likely team to want to go all out and tank and rebuild. I mean, that's what they should do. We talked about before the pod. But yeah, they're the worst team in the NBA for me. So I don't think they're the 26th. I think they're the 30th worst team.
Yeah, they're definitely on the backside of 25. They're definitely going towards this 30. For me, this is too high. I don't think they're the worst team. I think the Atlanta Hawks are the worst team. But this is my 29th team. This is going to be a really bad team.
Yeah, I think this is a team. Obviously, we pretty much know Dwayne Wade will not finish the season with the Bulls. He's going to get a buyout at some point, and I think they'll probably be either 29th or 30th, depending on what they do. You mentioned some of the teams. I think this is one team like the Hawks that it makes sense to just full out tank. This is kind of the first year of the rebuild, anyways, and there's no like guarantee any of the young talent they have on this roster is going to be great. So maybe you try to get that number 1 pick this year and kind of move forward.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah, because what are they going to win? Like most games they would win is high 20s, and they would just be bad and get a lower pick instead of having a high probability of getting number 1.
Yeah, and at some point this year, like you just mentioned, like Wade will likely be gone, and I wouldn't be surprised if Robin Lopez got dealt either by the deadline, because he's another big who can play defense, and I'm sure somebody will want him. He
had a nice series against Boston. He made his impact felt inside. And like you said, I think he will be moved at the deadline. He can definitely help a team. There's no point in kind of wasting his time in Chicago. And I wouldn't be surprised if Wade's bought out before the season starts.
Yeah, that's going to be the most interesting thing for me. Like, is he bought out? And, I mean, this is a front office that didn't want to spend $3.5 million, that wanted to get an extra $3.5 million. Garpacks don't, throw away money willy-nilly. Like, D-Wade's going to be wanting a buyout of a significant portion of his contract. He's got quite a bit of cash owed. So, like, if they can come to an agreement, that's going to be the main thing. Like, I'm less confident of a buyout by the start of the season. I think it's inevitable. It's just the timing of it.
Yeah, I think the reason that they would probably wait, like you said, Wade is going to want more money, and he'll have more leverage if he waits longer in the year because he's actually acquired some of that money. Yeah. Instead of, like right now, he hasn't earned any of it. So, but unless he wants to just join Cleveland right now, which we all think that's probably the most likely spot for him.
His kids apparently have been re-enrolled in a school in Florida. I read on Twitter somewhere. So, there's a jack bomb for you on this pod that I stole from someone. So, like, he may go back. There's Cleveland and Miami are the two rumors. So, like, his kids are, and obviously, like, his kids are within, in the AAU system. So, there might be something to that.
Well, if anyone's gonna, Pat Riley has felt, that now that you say Florida, Pat Riley has mentioned, in the past that he's upset that he didn't give Wade money because Wade deserved it. So who knows if Chicago, pays Wade, I don't know, $15 million or maybe less than that. Who knows? Pat might offer him a more generous contract just to keep, out of respect.
See, I don't know if Wade wants to go back to Miami because he was, I think, offended by that offer and the way that they handled that situation. Because it was reported that Pat Riley didn't even directly talk to Dwayne Wade in that offseason. So, I mean, Wade could go back there, but I think it would make more sense for him to actually try to win a championship with Cleveland than just go back to Miami and make the playoffs.
I'd rather go to Houston if I'm Wade personally. I just think there's too much going on in Cleveland.
But
if he signs a 1-year veteran, sorry, Jack, to cut you off, but if he signs a 1-year veteran deal in Cleveland, he leaves when LeBron leaves. I think in Houston, it's going to be hard for him to find playing time.
Yeah, that's fair. I was going to say, does he join Houston pre-Melo, or does do him and Melo have a bit of a chat? It's just look, I'm going to get the buyout. I'll waive my no trade. We'll both go to Houston. It's a very intriguing. I mean, it always is with the banana boat. A very intriguing story.
Oh, they're all talking. There's no doubt in my mind that they've had several conversations over this offseason between what they're all trying to do.
Oh yeah, that group chat's gonna be fire. I'd love to see what's going on in that.
Just hack me in there for a day. Give me
hopefully it's titled Banana Boat too. That'd be sick.
Yeah, and it's just got the banana emoji.
But moving on to the offseason this year, we'll start with obviously the biggest trade. They traded Jimmy Butler in the 16th pick to Minnesota Timberwolves for the 7th pick, Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine coming off a torn ACL. With that 7th pick, they drafted Lauri Markkanen. He's a big, he can shoot the ball. There's a lot of questions about him defensively and with his strength. What do you guys think about that 7th overall pick?
I disagree with it in the overall talent department because with players like Dennis Smith Jr. and Malik Monk still available, I understand that, yes, the Bulls have a glut of guards, but when you are rebuilding, you need to acquire talent. And Dennis Smith Jr. the other day was voted by his rookies as most likely to win Rookie of the Year. So he's going to be proving a lot of people wrong this year. I think Dennis Smith Jr. would have been, in a franchise team like the Chicago Bulls, one of those key market teams, he could have killed it there. Especially, you get rid of Chris Dunn and run around Dennis Smith Jr. and maybe Lauri Markkanen and Zach LaVine. That's a decent, not a decent team. It's probably a 26th best team, But I agree with what you were saying, Nick. His defense is something that really lacks. If anything, he's going to be like a Ryan Anderson 2.0, maybe even his teammate Nikola Mirotic.
I'm actually really high on Lauri Markkanen. I really actually like his game. I know defensively he's nothing. He might as well not even be on the floor defensively. For a 7-footer, he is horrendous. Like Kwame Brown bad. It's not good defensively. But offensively in this day and age, he's perfect. And I like his size from behind the arc, and I actually like his game offensively in the post. I mean, I know he has to have a lot of moves, but a guy who's 7 foot, your offense can develop decently, and you can still be very effective. And he's not like an overly thin guy either. He has decent size on him already. And if he can flip that into muscle, I actually think he could have a decent year.
He's basically.
Go ahead, Jack.
He's basically like Porzingis without the defense. That's what I see.
That was a lot of comparisons to Porzingis because he does move pretty well. I think defensively he just needs to get smarter. And obviously when you're 7 feet, it's not very hard to play defense and protect the rim if you have that length. You just have to be smart about it and not foul. And like Kory said, put some muscle on. Offensively, he definitely has a skill set. It's kind of like, there is some risk to this pick, but it could work out really well. He is a fit with the new NBA and a kind of a big man that you want. I don't know if he'll necessarily have a great year this year, but I could see him developing in the future and being a nice piece for them.
Yeah, I like the direction. This is one of the better picks, and I agree, Jack. Hindsight 2020, Dennis Smith Jr. should have went before a lot of guys.
Oh yeah,
he fell way farther than he should have, and Mark Cuban got lucky, incredibly lucky.
It's like Christmas and Kwanzaa for him all at once.
Yeah, so this won't be the best pick that they could have had, but I think it's going to end up being a decent pick.
I think could have had as well.
Go ahead, Jack.
If we're analyzing that trade as well, they could have we haven't said it yet. They should have been able to somehow convince Tom Thibodeau, can we keep our 16th pick as well? So then they could have had 2 nice young pieces to build around. But instead, they've just got Lauri Markkanen. a 16th pick isn't a world changer, but a Harry Giles, a Harry Giles who went to the Kings. I'm not sure if he was probably around the 20 mark, but a talent like that, or a Jared Allen, a talent like that is something that the Bulls severely need. They severely lack talent. So they were just completely shafted by Tom Thibodeau yet again.
Yeah, and being part of the trade, I think the fact that they traded for Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine kind of handcuffed them in the sense that they're like, all right, we traded for guards, we don't want to draft a guard. Whereas so they should have been more like Jack said, more open to just acquiring young talent or maybe trying to get a different package.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think the Timberwolves are the only team on the table. Maybe they offer the best deal, but if you're giving up your 16th pick, that's just pitiful. There's no need for them to have to throw their 16th pick in there, and that was just kind of like Thibodeau owning them once again.
Was this trade worse than the Indiana Paul George trade? That's the big comparison. That's the big hot point.
I think Zach LaVine's.
I hate to bring it up, but
Zach LaVine's health is going to be a determining factor on that because coming off a torn ACL, being that type of explosive player, if he can, get back to what he was doing last year and continue to improve, that's a great piece to add to your team. And a lot depends on what happens with the 7th pick. Obviously, the Pacers didn't get a draft pick; they traded after the draft.
Yeah,
I think this is the better deal, the Butler deal, but I think they're both bad deals.
Oh yeah,
I don't think we're talking about like a C trade rating to like a D trade rating.
Yeah,
we're not talking anything more than that.
Yeah, I think just the fact that they only moved up 9 spots, it kind of takes some value out of it. And they did trade for Chris Dunn, who many people weren't impressed with last year. But I probably agree with Kory. I think this trade was probably a tad better, but not by much.
Well, you just said that too, Nick. They traded up 9 spots, and this was the guy you had to trade 9 spots up for. That's the funny part. I think he's gonna be a decent player, but it's still he's not the guy I trade up 9 spots to get.
Yeah, it's not like you're telling your fans we just lost Jimmy Butler, a star who's probably gonna get even a little bit better for the 7th overall pick for a guy that best case scenario is maybe an all-star.
Yeah, it was again though. It's another questionable move by the Bulls front office.
Yeah, we'll talk about them. Don't worry, they're gonna get an earful. But talking about the guys they acquired in that trade, Zach LaVine and Chris Dunn. What are your thoughts on those two?
Look, to echo your sentiments, Nick, I think LaVine, if coming back healthy, has a really, really nice ceiling. Offensively, especially, he developed that 3-point shot. He was 38.7% from the 3 before that injury. His offensive game has come leaps and bounds. It's whether he can become a bit more active defensively because this has become more and more of a two-way league. Not everyone can be Lou Williams and James Harden on defense. Zach LaVine might be able to because he is probably the focal point of this Bulls team. But for Chris Dunn as well, I guess he balances out the lack of defense that Zach LaVine sort of has, but he does it in a way that he has absolutely no offensive game. Everyone expected him to be he was a favorite, one of the Rookie of the Year favorites last year. And his assists numbers were horrible, 2.4 assists. His 3-point shooting was 20.8%. His field goal overall was under 40 at 37%. So he's got no offensive game. If you compare those stats to Cameron Payne, I'm wondering if Cameron Payne probably has a better offensive game than him. By the eye test, I would go, Chris Dunn has a much higher ceiling, just because. But at the same time, Chris Dunn he wasn't a one and done guy. He had 3-4 years in college, so he's got legs on him. Whereas some of these other guys, we talk about D'Angelo Russell, Brandon Ingram, those are one and done guys that have the time to develop. Whereas Chris Dunn has done a lot of his developing. There isn't much upside to him, if any. The only way is up for Chris Dunn. That he can't get any worse next year.
Yeah, I definitely think Chris Dunn has a lot of growing room still. But like you said, the fact that he stayed a couple extra years in college and he still hasn't developed a jump shot, that's concerning if the jump shot hasn't improved. But Zach LaVine, obviously the knee is going to be an issue. I'm not overly worried about it. Not the first one, at least. I feel like nowadays, a lot of people get a knee injury and they come back fine. It's when they have 2 or 3 of the same injury that you have to begin.
Rose.
Rose, Blake Griffin. Like Parker is somebody I worry about, a guy who's already had 2 knee problems. After his first one, he came back and he looked fine. So I'm okay with Levine as long as he can stay healthy after this knee injury. And I think, offensively, he's going to have like a Westbrook type season. Like not as good, but like offensively, he's just going to take the ball and do things himself.
Yeah, I think Zach LaVine, they need to be smart with him in the sense he's coming off a torn ACL. Like Kory mentioned, obviously they deal with ACL injuries a lot better than they have in the past. The difference in 5 years from someone dealing with a torn ACL till now, we've seen players come back in the NBA and the NFL still have pop. So they just need to be smart with him. That's something that the Bulls don't necessarily do, is be smart. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Chris Dunn, one thing I will say about him, obviously it was a disappointing season in Minnesota. One thing that does help young players, though, is a change of scenery. It's kind of a reminder, this is the NBA and I need to get better. So hopefully that can help him. You always want to see a young guy who is drafted high have somewhat of a successful career. You don't want to see him, dwindle down.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And I think one more thing on Zach LaVine. I tried to do like the utmost research to find like when he is actually coming back. He did the ACL in February of last season. So like you expect 9 to 12 months. I've read that, they're being uber cautious with him. And the track record of the Chicago Bulls trainers and medical staff isn't great. Like Derrick Rose would often clash with them. So they're going to want, like Zach LaVine is their new franchise guy. So they're going to want to treat him very, very carefully, cover him in cotton wool until, he is 110%.
Yeah, I hopefully they do, and they're just smart about it because there's not really much for them to play for this year in the sense of going to the playoffs or anything like that. But let's talk about signings. We mentioned this guy in the Knicks pod, Justin Holiday. He's a guy that showed some good things with the Knicks. Obviously, he's not going to be a game changer, but he's a nice piece to bring off the bench.
Yeah, I like him. He was with the Bulls, funnily enough, the year before he was with the Knicks last year. So they know who they're getting. He's a nice little depth piece. They don't have a lot of sort of shooting guard, small forward, like sort of wing guys. So it's just a nice addition to add to the roster. And he puts up some points. He can score.
One of their better signings because it's actually a guy who fits in with Fred.
Yeah,
a nice wing defender who can shoot the long ball. So obviously he's not going to play much more than he did last season. 20 minutes is probably a good amount for somebody on this horrible Bulls roster, but he'll get a chance to play it.
Yeah, and then also they picked up David Nwaba from the Lakers, who waived him. I don't know if he's a lock to make the roster, but he could be a guy that they play because they could just use wings on this team and somebody who's going to bring some energy.
Yeah, it's the position, the most important position, that wing position. So if there's any chance that there's some sort of upside, whether it be defensive or offensive, it's worth taking a punt.
He's a solid pick. He's cheap. $1 million for a young guy. He showed decent. I know defensively he was very good for the Lakers last year. It's offensively that he's going to be the big question mark still. Not a very good 3-point shooter. So defensively, it's a defensive guy. Chicago loves their defense, but it's not really a guy who's going to help them much. Yeah,
it's you take a flyer on a young guy when you're in a rebuilding stage. He's somebody to look at. Now let's go to the departures. This list is pretty long. We'll start with Jimmy Butler. We mentioned him a million times already, but this is going to be a huge loss for this team.
Yeah, top 15 talent, incredible two-way player. It was like I mentioned earlier. Ultimately, it was either Butler or Hoiberg, and the front office decided to go with Hoiberg, and I disagree with it. The majority of the NBA world does, especially with the package they got in return. He's essentially irreplaceable.
100%. I'm happy for Jimmy Butler.
Oh yeah.
For both fans, it's unfortunate. Obviously, you're losing your best player and someone you could have built your team around. For Minnesota, like Tom Thibodeau knew who he was getting. We're talking about the guy who molded Jimmy Butler to who he is now.
Yeah, exactly.
And an absolute steal for the Timberwolves. Jimmy Butler, I think he still has another level he could get. And I think playing with the guys he's playing with now, we're going to see the best Jimmy Butler next year.
Just to a funny. Oh, sorry, Nick. Just a funny Jimmy Butler story. Last year, Me, my brother, and his friends. My brother is a huge Bulls fan, so we went to 2 or 3 Bulls games, and he won some money when we, went on our Vegas sort of trip. So with that extra $500, $600, he bought like 4 different colorway jerseys of Jimmy Butler. So he's got like a Christmas one, he's got the home one, he's got the away one, and now he's selling me one for like $10. He's selling me like a black one to my best friend for like $20. I'm just like, I feel for you, bro. Because then, like, you had the Derrick Rose ones as well. It's just like, it's not a fun life being a Bulls fan.
It's tough buying jerseys in the NBA in general.
Oh, it's tough anyway, yeah. But, like,
So, but I
burn
mean, for what you guys mentioned, it's tough to trade Jimmy Butler in the sense that, like, he didn't ever demand a trade. It wasn't like, I need to get out of Chicago right now, like, trade me. He's still under contract. It's like, why did you pull the trigger on that offer? And you kind of waited. Like, we mentioned it off air. The Celtics got a better deal for Kyrie.
Yeah,
and who?
Exactly.
I mean, like, personally, who would you guys rather have, Kyrie Irving or Jimmy Butler?
Jimmy Butler in a heartbeat.
Jimmy Butler with Isaiah Thomas there, and the fact, you'd probably trade Isaiah Thomas in that deal. But yeah,
or they do, or they might not have to because they have other assets they could make it work. So
I definitely think Jimmy Butler is the better all around player in that situation for that team in that setting.
Kyrie's obviously the better offensive player scoring wise, and he's proven more in the playoffs. But Butler's defensive impact is something you can't turn your head against. And one thing that always stuck out for me, even that he didn't necessarily do a great job on LeBron, he wasn't ever afraid to defend him. And that's something that not many players in this league are willing to do.
And another thing, Jimmy Butler was another guy, a lot like Melo in the sense where every time he was asked in the media, because obviously Jimmy Butler was another guy all last season who was constantly, will he be traded? Will the Celtics get him? Every time he said, like, I want to be here, like, Chicago is where I want to be. Like, and he was great in the community in Chicago as well. Like, this is a guy who had no intentions of leaving.
And the front office played him. They told him that they were not going to trade him, and they traded him, and he was not too happy about that, just being lied to. But enough about Butler. Obviously, we wish him the best in Minnesota. Let's talk about some of the other departures. Rajon Rondo, Michael Carter-Williams, Joffrey Laverne. Out of those guys, who do you think is going to hurt the most?
Probably Rajon Rondo. I mean, it's the most obvious one, the one with the most NBA experience, playoff experience for the Bulls, namely. And like we were mentioning, that his impact, I think, for the young players, I think he could have been a nice piece to sort of, build around. He could have helped Chris Dunn because not that they have like, very similar games in the sense that like, they're both good passers. But, you need those vets in many ways. And I think, New Orleans are building something that's intriguing, to say the least. But yeah, Rondo makes the most sense as he would have had the most impact this season, despite his age and despite his, overall decline.
Yeah, for me, the biggest loss has got to be Michael Carter-Williams. No, I'm just kidding. It's Rondo. We saw last year in the playoffs what this Bulls team could have been with a healthy Rondo and everyone playing as a unit. Because at the end of the day, when Rondo gets to run an offense his way, even though that's not really what Fred wants, that system worked because Rondo is playmaking. Rondo has got to be top 5 in the league playmaking wise. Yeah. He may not be a top 5 point guard, but his playmaking ability is still up there because the guy still gets assists. He still sets up his teammates beautifully. So I think, and like having a team with all these rookies and a lot of guys who may not be great at creating their own shot yet, Rondo gives you decent looks, and I think that definitely hurts, especially because you're not having a playmaker, fill his shoes.
Yeah, I think Rondo was kind of the obvious choice. Michael Carter-Williams, obviously, he's having a rough career. He's in Charlotte now. Joffrey Laverne, he could probably do nice things with San Antonio. He's a young guy who, obviously, I think he has some talent. I don't think he'll ever be a great player, but he could be a solid role guy in the future. A guy that they have that's still a free agent right now, he's a restricted free agent, Nikola Mirotic. He had a disappointing year last year. It's kind of unsure. I mean, most likely scenario is that he's probably going to sign the qualifying offer with the Bulls this year and play out the season and be an unrestricted free agent next year. What do you guys think is going to happen with him?
I remember reading on The Ringer, that qualifying offer out of like the players that are still yet to re-sign, Nerlens Noel, those sort of guys, is at about $7 million. So I think that's probably his market worth right now. It's not like 2 or 3 million like Nerlens Noel's was. So I think, that makes the most sense for him, as you were saying, Nick. sign it. Ball out this season. You don't have to play for the Bulls next season. Show them what they would be missing if they weren't to re-sign you. He is, and I'm sure he could probably to an extent mentor. What's the new guy's name again?
Laurie Marketing.
Yeah, he could certainly be a nice mentor for him. They could develop a nice relationship. They have similar games. So I think it's who else is going to pick him up? Like there hasn't been any. We read Twitter like more than any people that I know. NBA Twitter is the most active of any sport going around, and I haven't read any rumors about Nikola Mirotic being chased down by any team. So I think it's
the only rumor I read about Mirotic is that his agent reached out to other teams for offers that nobody came to him. So that's never a good sign for a player.
No, not at all.
I'm just looking at all the stats. I know that we had a conversation about stats before off air, but his numbers really didn't drop, and they're not really that bad. But then, just from watching the Bulls last year, you think about him defensively, and then you just realize why the agent had to call people. Because offensively, he's not bad in the stretch four, but this guy can't play defense at all.
Yeah, he's just really inconsistent. Like his rookie season was probably his best season in the NBA, and he just defensively, like you mentioned, we probably could get past him on ball because he just stands there, straight up. He doesn't really play great defense. He just doesn't seem that into it. He can shoot the ball when he's hitting a shot, but there's times where he gets ice cold. I remember, he's probably one player that pissed me off in FanDuel more than any other player. I remember one night I was like top 100. I had Mirotic playing, and this dude gets me like 3 points. If he just has a solid fantasy game, I'm probably walking away with a couple $100. But thanks a lot, Nikola Mirotic.
I think that will probably be like what the Bulls will be saying to him at the end of next season. Thanks a lot.
I think when he gets a contract, he owes you a reimbursement.
Yeah, he probably should, but that he doesn't seem like the guy that would do that. But let's talk Dwayne Wade. We talked about the buyout a little bit before, so we all agree that he will be bought out by the Bulls by the end of this season.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm torn. This Bulls front office is so unpredictable at this point.
I think Wade, though, kind of wants to get out of there at some point. Like, he can't be happy wanting to lose, 40, 50 games, 60 games maybe.
Yeah, and especially at age 36, and with a body that can, like you guys were saying, barely reach the NBA rims these days. He's going to want it to, either make money, which he's, if he gets a buyout, that's plenty enough, or win some games. And he can do that in Cleveland, he can do that in Houston, he can do that in Boston, he can do that a little bit more in Miami. So I think, like we were sort of saying, the timing is going to be the real sticking point. When will Garpax make that point? When will D Wade and his management come to that point? When will he stop doing Stance Sox promo ads and stuff? When will he, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think that Wade, even though he's 36, on a team like Cleveland or a team like Houston, and if he went to a contending team, off the bench for, he played 30 minutes last season. You play him for 25 minutes in a lesser role. Wade still has flashes of the Hall of Fame Wade that we all saw in his prime.
His post game is still good.
His post game is really good.
His touch in the post
shot,
it is tough. Even against elite defenders who saw him last year, still be able to drop those shots. It's just tough to defend. But his lack of shooting is something that I'm never a fan of. Lacking 3-point ball. If he can consistently do that, but I agree with you, Kory, in the sense that if he's in a lesser role, he's going to be a better player. And then also, if you only make him play 60 games, you don't necessarily need him to play the full season. You have him fresh for the playoffs. It's going to help.
And I know the stats don't show it, but he's also a pretty good playmaker.
He's a smart basketball player.
Yeah,
he's very smart.
He may not get the giant assist numbers, but if you watch him pass the ball, he's a good passer.
Yeah, and he moves the ball offensively too.
Yeah, the thing is, if he were to say go to Cleveland, would he close out games with LeBron, Isaiah, Crowder, Thompson, or would that be to J.R. Smith? Because D Wade's, as much as we all say he'd be willing to play a lesser role, the ego and the in basketball is everyone is still going to take a hit if it's like, well, look, you're not probably good enough to play against the Warriors right now. You're probably not good enough to take on the Celtics right now. And especially like, if J.R. Smith is a much more capable defender. We all know that. So it'll certainly be interesting how it plays out, where he lies. I don't think he would finish games for many teams.
Yeah, that's a very good point too.
You know what it would come down to, I think, with Cleveland? If he went to Cleveland, say he ends up, and we're talking about this situation, I think it depends on who LeBron has more faith in. If Dwayne Wade's 36 and LeBron says, I want Wade in there, or LeBron or Wade, and I don't know. I think it also depends on in the situation of who. Like LeBron, I feel like would want Wade in the final 5 minutes of a Game 7 against the Warriors.
He would, but at the same time, like if Isaiah's in that same game, you've got that backcourt of Isaiah Thomas and Dwayne Wade is pretty pitiful defensively. They are not going to be able to guard Steph Curry and Klay Thompson at all, and like that leaves a lot of work for LeBron, for Tristan, and for Jay Crowder, Kevin Love if he comes, or wherever he fits in. There needs to be some sort of backcourt defensive presence, and I don't think, as much as we were saying D Wade's still got those offensive flashes, I think that as you age, the defense is the number one thing to go, because that is what requires the most energy. And you can always get your own buckets, up until you're probably 50 years old in the Big Three league.
Yeah, no, defense is true. I mean, I think obviously the Wade's what he wants out of this position at whatever team he signs with is going to depend on that. Obviously, he'll probably have a talk with Ty Lue, LeBron, and what they envision his role as. But you made a great point. You can't really play Isaiah Thomas and Dwayne Wade down the stretch against a team like the Warriors. But hey, you never know. Relationships are big in the NBA. But let's talk front office and coaching. This is probably, I mentioned this to Jack off air, probably this front office and this whole coaching staff is on the hot seat. As Jack has mentioned, Garpax, president and GM, and then also Fred Hoiberg as the head coach. I mean, things have not been going well in Chicago. They haven't really had much success since a few years ago when Tibbs was there. But what do you think is going to happen this year? If they have a bad season, do you think everybody's cleaned out, or they're going to hold on at least another year?
Look, it depends if they can establish a direction. Last season, Nick and I, we always tend to do this. We compare it to the Nets. The Nets last season won 20 games, but those 20 games had direction, and we can see the future of where we are going. Our front office has a lot more savvy than Garpax does, but there's just, especially like you were saying at the start of the pod, Nick, the fact that the signings of Rondo and Wade made absolutely no sense to where the direction of the NBA, let alone where the Bulls need to be going. They're sort of blowing it up now, so we know that they need to rebuild. Fred Hoiberg is going to have a huge season, in terms of as a coach. Like, will he finally be able to have an imprint and on his own system on this team? Will he be able to make an impact with, D Wade and Jimmy Butler now out of the frame? Will he be able to make an imprint on these young guys? It's all, there's a lot of questions to be answered, and I don't know if there's a lot of happy answers at the end of the road.
Yeah, and I mean, Hoiberg, there's a lot of talk about him not having control of the team, and Jimmy Butler and Dwayne Wade not listening to him with his play calls. So I think that could be another reason they could look to get rid of Wade, just because, he wants to have full ownership of the team and give him a real shot. Direction is important. Maybe Paxton and Foreman, they thought, we get ahead of this and we try to get the rebuild in here, maybe they won't cut us out, but who knows? It's tough to say because some people would have hoped they got fired last year.
I'm thinking that Foreman gets fired either by midseason or by the end of next year. I think he's gone before anybody else.
It wouldn't surprise me.
He's the middleman.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of the fault might be on Paxton, Paxton will never be the first guy to go. Yeah,
there needs to be a scapegoat in some sense.
Yeah, very true. That's what happens in the NBA, sadly. But enough about those guys. There's a good chance they could not have a job by next year, or who knows, maybe they got a good relationship with ownership. Starters, who do you think are going to be the Bulls starters? We'll do a lineup with Dwayne Wade and then one without him, like we did for Melo.
Yeah, that's one thing that I had written down here. So I had Chris Dunn, Levine, or when he returns, D Wade. So at the point, I'd have Chris Dunn, Levine / D Wade. That's your back court. And your front court is probably Paul Zipser, Nikola Mirotic, and Mirotic or Bobby Portis, depending on that contract situation. And the stalwart of the Chicago Bulls, Robin Lopez.
For me, this is my Wade lineup. I'll say Zach LaVine, Dwayne Wade, Zipser. I guess for center it'd be either I'm gonna say Felicio and then Lopez at the 5.
Personally, I think they would probably go Robin Lopez at center, Bobby Portis definitely at the 4. I really like Portis' game, and he's one player. Actually, he was probably a person I might have considered as a highlight last year because he improved his game a little bit, and they call him Crazy Eyes Portis. I've even heard of lineups of possibly starting 3 guards of like Chris Dunn, Dwayne Wade, and Zach LaVine. LaVine obviously is athletic enough to do that. Without Wade, they could go with Zipser or maybe Valentine, depending on how he improved this year. I know last year he had a good summer league. Paul Zipser's game doesn't really scream potential to me, whereas though in Denzel Valentine, I could see him improving and being a good NBA player.
Yeah, Kory, it's interesting. You didn't have Chris Dunn at all in your starting lineup.
No, I didn't even give my without Wade. My fault. Without Wade, it'd be Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, and I actually think a part of me wants to say Denzel Valentine is going to get minutes next year, like a lot. But maybe not. So then I guess Zipser at the 3, and then I completely spaced Nick. Bobby Portis is definitely going to be the 4 on that team, and then Robin Lopez at the 5.
I think Valentine, what I like about him is I like his skill set. He seems like a skilled NBA player. Obviously, he didn't have a great rookie season, but plenty of guys do not do well their rookie year and then bounce back. With more minutes and a bigger role and maybe, things going a little bit better and more freedom possibly, or a system that's more focused on these players, could end up in more development for these guys.
Plus, he has one of the best names in the NBA, Denzel Valentine. Like, great name.
Very true. That's always a plus, especially jersey sales.
In Summer League again, he had another decent year in Summer League this year too. I know it's Summer League, it's
grain of salt.
What's the true value?
It still I always like to look at Summer League, not necessarily how the guys do, but I like to see if they added anything to their game. That's always important to me. But let's talk about breakout players. Who is your breakout starter?
Look, I think it goes without saying. I trashed on him enough, but I think Chris Dunn has, there's potential and there's tools there. So I think, what is his ceiling? Is it all NBA defense? Is it, a Patrick Beverley sort of type? And if it is Patrick Beverley sort of type, he definitely needs to develop some sort of offensive game to sort of, warrant his, lack of and his high defensive capabilities. So I think the only way is up for him because his numbers were so low with the Timberwolves last year. Plus he is their best point guard right now. So he will be playing 28 to 35 minutes per night. So those numbers will definitely increase.
We're all gonna pick different people. I feel like I'm gonna go with Denzel Valentine. I just think losing Jimmy Butler, there's minutes to be had, and once they buy out Dwayne Wade, which we all think they're gonna do, there's gonna be a lot of minutes for these guys, and he's definitely gonna get a chance to earn a role on this team going forward. And so, I actually think he'll take advantage of it. He's had a sense so far in at least the summer league games where on his own he can take over a game. And I think with a higher usage rate and like you said, Nick, more minutes, I think he'd actually take a big part of this offense for himself.
I'm gonna go with my crazy-eyed friend Bobby Portis. I just like the energy this kid plays with. Even when he played a couple minutes, he was in there grabbing a ton of rebounds. He just seems really into it. They just obviously need to get him a little bit more disciplined and focus on doing the right things and just develop his skill set a little bit more. But I like what he could do. He's going to see good minutes. What about breakout bench player? It's kind of tough to predict with this team because we don't really know who's going to start because there could be a lot of flip-flopping. I had Denzel Valentine as my breakout bench guy, but he easily could start in breakout as well.
Yeah, I had the same. I'd Valentine or, depending on if Porter starts. I think it's likely that he does, but if Mirotic were to start, then Portis would be my sort of bench guy, sort of star. But if not, it'd be Portis Valentine. Those are my two guys. Both of them sort of have the tools, as we've sort of been saying. They've got really great energy, like, hustle, those sort of attributes that you can't really teach to NBA players that are really, really invaluable to NBA teams these days. So I think either of those two are definitely going to have an imprint with the departure of Jimmy Butler.
All right, so I don't know if Zipser starts, but I think Zipser is my other breakout player. In the late last year when he started getting some minutes and playing, he was actually one of the better shooters that the Bulls had. One of the better ones that they're not very good shooters, let me add. But I think with, like we said, there's minutes to be had. And at the 3 position, at 6'8", Zipser played pretty well last year for them. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has a very good season.
Also, keep an eye on Felicio. I mentioned him earlier. I think he's another guy off the bench that maybe could get some more minutes too. He's a young guy, and like we mentioned, they could move Robin Lopez. But let's get to our predictions for the wins for this team. This is probably my favorite part. Best case scenario.
Especially when we got Kory on board. My best case, I went a bit high with the Hawks. But I think just because the coaching system of the Hawks is quite high, I rate Budenholzer, whereas Fred Hoiberg's quite inexperienced. So my best case is under 30 wins for these guys. So I'll go best case 26, 28. Max wins.
Yeah, all right. So I'm not crazy so far. Best case scenario for me is like 25 wins. I have this team being slightly better than the Hawks.
Best case for me is high 20s. What's worst case for you guys?
I'll let Kory go last because I think that's going to be like the bomb. So my worst case is less than 20. The Nets were 20-62. Last year. I think their worst case is probably something like 18 wins.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like either, around that 19 to 21 range, just they trade all the, Wade's bought out, Robin Lopez is traded, and, they're rolling with all young guys. Fred Hoiberg doesn't really have good control of the team. They're not winning very many games. What about you, Kory?
Doesn't get fit.
Yeah, Levine doesn't come back for a while.
Your guys' worst case is only right around 20. I was thinking right around 14 to 15 is worst case scenario. That's worst case. Well, that's worst case
worse.
scenario.
That's historic. I mean, like if you look at this team, it's not like completely out of the question because they're banking on a lot of these young guys to hopefully be okay. But if you look at it offensively, there could be some major issues if they get rid of Dwayne Wade and Robin Lopez. Not to say Lopez is a great player either, but he's at least a good player to have.
And let's say this, God forbid Levine doesn't come back like Zach Levine. Or he struggles coming off the knee injury.
Or he doesn't come back till January.
Right. And this team is going to be really bad if Zach Levine's not on the floor.
Yeah, that'll be trash.
And that says a lot, to be honest, if you're banking a lot on Zach Levine. Not saying he's a bad player or anything, but he's an improving young guy. But you're banking on Zach Levine to be one of your main pieces who's coming off a torn ACL. Your expectations can't be too crazy. What about your actual prediction for this team?
I've got 22 wins. I think that, somewhere around that low 20 range is where they'll be. Barring any major injuries, the likely storylines D-Wade gets bought out. They might start off well, like a lot of these teams do, depending on their record and their schedule. But I think that they are not going to get any higher than 25 wins.
Yeah, I'm going with 19 wins on the season.
So they're worse than last year's Nets.
Yeah, I think they're a lot worse than last.
Well, I mean, they don't have Brook Lopez. Like, not to say Brook Lopez is the best center in the NBA, but he was a good player last year for the Nets, and they don't have anybody really comparable to him, especially when we expect his twin to be traded and we expect Dwayne Wade to be bought out. So,
and then, Nick, what was your favorite thing about the Nets last year?
They played hard.
What else did they do? They shot a lot of threes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This
team don't got threes to keep them in games like the Nets do. I'm telling you, I just don't see a team that's bound to score a lot of points to keep them in enough games.
Yeah, it definitely could be a rough year for Chicago, but they kind of know that. They traded their best player away, and that's usually what happens. For me, I'm going to go probably the low mid-20s, maybe from that like 22 to 24 range. But I also could see like something closer to my worst case scenario as well, just because we mentioned a lot of question marks on this team. I could see the Hawks being better than the Bulls. I really could.
These two teams are definitely fighting. It's going to be – can we just watch one together? Us three. Hawks versus Bulls. because that
Let's
will be
pencil it in.
oh man, I can't wait to see that disgusting game of basketball.
If we're comparing the talent on the two rosters, like if we're comparing, say, the best player on each two, Dennis Schroeder is by far, and I'm not by far, but he is a better player than Zach LaVine, is he not?
Yeah, I would say, especially with the ACL injury, you're more, a safer bet. And there is talent on Atlanta. It's just a lot of question marks. I mean, both teams are just a lot of question marks. When you're talking about bottom 5 teams, you're talking about question marks all over the place.
That's a great point. That's a great point, Nick.
Like even pretty much, to be honest, from teams 20 to 30, you don't really know what's going to happen. Those pieces all are really interchangeable. And like we saw, I remember the first year I did the NBA Outlet Preview series, I did the rankings myself. We based it off my power rankings instead of the staff, and I put the Portland Trailblazers at like number 28. They had lost Wesley Matthews, Nick Batum, and LaMarcus Aldridge, and Robin Lopez. And next thing I know, they make the playoffs. So don't be surprised that one of these teams, not saying the Bulls or the Hawks will, but one of these bottom teams surprises you.
And one thing, just to piggyback off your question, the question mark thing, most good teams in the league, do they have any question marks? Not really.
Yeah, the most of their question marks are going to come about bench pieces or, small roles. Their starters are pretty established. When we're going through the starters for the top 10 teams, there's not going to be really much debate.
Yeah, most of their question marks relate to, like, in comparison to, how does this compare to the Warriors? That's basically their question.
Yeah, exactly. That's honestly, when I'm ranking teams or when I'm looking at the top teams, I always think about offseason moves is, how are they going to compete with Golden State? Does this help them beat Golden State? Does this not help them beat Golden State? Can they play this guy on the floor against a death lineup? So it's just to kind of tell you, like, the Warriors own the NBA right now. And until somebody takes them off their mantle, they own the NBA.
I think what I do like about what teams are currently doing, especially in the West, they're still fighting because at the same time, things can happen. Like these are athletes, these are human beings. Kevin Durant could get injured a few weeks later in the first round of the playoffs. Stephen Curry could do what happened in 2015-16 where he wasn't healthy, which allowed
Draymond Green.
Like weird, wacky things can happen in the NBA, especially with what has happened in this offseason. So this.
And when you play a team like Houston, this is why I wanted to see Houston play Golden State last year. Not to say they would have won, but a team that shoots a ton of threes just makes it. There's just a chance if they get hot that night and they're hitting 50% from three. It's tough to beat any team that's shooting 50% from three.
Yeah, I think Houston would have been a challenge for them last year too, Nick. I don't think they would have beat them, but it would have been a lot of offense.
Well, like the San Antonio Spurs, like they were a Kawhi Leonard injury away from winning that game 1. And yes, we don't know what would have happened across 7 games, but I would have backed them in with Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard was playing some outstanding basketball.
And defensively, he made his impact felt, and he really led that team. So, you're right, Jack. Anything can happen, but I think everybody's kind of chasing the Warriors at this point.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the truth. Emoji today for the Bulls is going to be, that face with a hand over it, like.
That was one of mine. That was one of the ones I was looking at.
Yeah, like the Bulls fan, like. We've hated on you guys a lot this podcast, and I'm sorry, but I've been a Nets fan. Jack's been a Nets fan. Kory's a Pacers fan, so we're all kind of due for not that great of seasons. So we're not that hard of hating, but your front office is looking pretty bad with the moves they're making. So it's just like,
Yeah, I've got the tired face for him. Like you could have the tired face probably for the Hawks as well. Like it's boring. This is going to be a boring. The story, the trajectory for this team isn't going to be great. I'm not going to be that excited for what happens, to the Bulls. I'll probably watch more Hawks games than Bulls games. That's a big call. I don't know if you'll like that, Kory, but I'm going to watch probably maybe 1.5 Bulls Hawks games and maybe like a couple of quarters of a Bulls game.
I think Hawks have some intriguing talent that you might want to watch. Like I'm interested in John Collins, and Dennis Schroeder.
If the Bulls were on TNT, then maybe I'd watch them. Because, the TNT Bulls are
they're not a thing anymore.
Yeah. I doubt they would get. I doubt they have more than like 3 nationally televised games.
I think they have 3 or 4. All right, my emoji is just gonna be the guy throwing trash away. Yes, this is my trash hoop team.
Trash emoji for the Bulls. All right, let's move on to League Pass rating. Where do you rate the Bulls 1 through 10?
I'm giving them a solid 2. Nothing more.
Damn.
Kory, what
Okay.
about you?
Damn. I wanted to give him a 2.
I stole it.
Well, I'm gonna give him a 2. I'm gonna give him a 2 as well. I'm gonna give him a 2.
Well, this is the first agreement I think we've had. I'm going to go with a 2 as well, just because after talking about them, I just not that interested in watching the team. When Zach LaVine's back and if he is healthy, I'll probably tune into a few more games because I want to see what he does in kind of a lead type role. But until then, not much hype from me.
I'm more interested in the Bulls than the Hawks, for me at least, just because I want to see LaVine. The Hawks, I don't know. I can't get behind anything the Hawks do. Hawks and Pistons for me.
Hawks hater.
They never get my love.
All right. You would watch the Bulls over what TV show that you like?
All right, so I'm going to stick to the sort of London theme, international theme. I'm going to go with Downton Abbey. I got no love for that show. Like I have no idea. Like do they just like have crumpets and tea like the entire thing? Like that's just the impression that I get. I'm sure there's some drama, like probably what's happening with the Bulls in that front office, but like it just does not interest me at all.
Okay. I think I'm gonna go with Skins.
I love Skins.
Skins isn't that bad.
I'm not a big fan of Skins.
But like early Skins, like Skins first, second generation is like fire. But like the later generations of Skins, yeah, I can totally see that. Like
is there's an American version and a London version of them or no?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same with IT Crowd as well. Like they just like destroy anything good that the UK have made. Like the IT Crowd version has like Joel McHale instead of Chris O'Dowd, the Irish guy, and it's just like one of the most unwatchable, horrific things that I've ever seen. And the same with the In-Betweeners. Like, it just doesn't have the inherent British, banter that is just, like, synonymous with the show. Skins, that's a big call, Kory.
Right. That show for me is only on if, like, I'm being forced to watch it, so.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a TV show that I don't even really like, and I'm going to go with one of my girlfriend's shows. I'll go with, like, Jane the Virgin.
Yes. That's one of my girlfriend's favorite shows.
All three of us.
That show won a Golden Globe. Like, she won a Golden Globe, and I mean, good for her, but like,
she does a good job acting, but the plot is just like so like
every episode something has to happen. It's just like why?
So much crying. Oh
my god.
It's feel like a telenovela sort of theme to it, and I'm like, it's got like. To me, I don't know why I see similarities between Jane the Virgin and Ugly Betty, but I see like similar sort of vibes. I never really got into either of them.
Yeah, that's like Kory said, that's a show that I'm kind of forced to watch that I don't necessarily want to watch. So Bulls fan, you can kind of take that as you want to take that. But I'm still watching your team over that, so that's a positive for you.
We only watch it out of love. We don't watch for any other reason.
Yeah. But that wraps it up for today. Chicago Bulls fans, please do not unfollow OTG Basketball on Twitter. This is not all of our thoughts, just only a few of us. But thank you, Kory. Thank you, Jack, for hopping on, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Later, fellas.
Cheers, guys.